I'm Jay Horton. I make movies that make money. This is how. Once upon a time, there was independent film, and there was independent film distribution. And for many, many years, it was very tough, if not impossible, for an independent film producer to submit their films directly to any major platforms without an aggregator, distributor, or some kind of sales agent or representative. In order to get material onto almost any major platform, you had to go through some kind of gatekeeper or middleman. DIY distribution back then meant selling out of your car or off your own website. And then a little site called Createspace changed everything. Createspace On Demand Publishing LLC, doing business as Createspace, was a self-publishing service owned by Amazon. Createspace was one of the first major media on-demand companies to transition into streaming. When it started, self-publishing authors or musicians could upload their books or their music, and filmmakers could upload their films. Then, when a customer ordered one, Createspace would create that physical book, CD, or DVD on demand and ship it to the customer for you, and you'd split the back end. The breakthrough here was there was no upfront cost to the artist. Around 2010 or 2011, I think it was, that I discovered Createspace, and I was using it to list DVD versions of some of my older films on Amazon for sale. And it was right around this time that they started offering the option of releasing that same movie from the same file on Amazon Prime Video for streaming. You could list your title for rental, sale, or to stream free with Prime. So it was both TVOD and SVOD. And at the time, very few indie filmmakers knew about this or took advantage of it. I think I listed my first movie for streaming on Amazon through them in 2012. And this was before Amazon actually broke off into Prime Video Direct. Anything going on Amazon streaming had to go through Createspace. But before that, you needed a distributor. And in those days, you would license a movie to a distributor for, 5 to 7 years typically. And at the end, you could either re-up that license or take the rights back. In most cases, indies make like 95% of what they're going to in the first 2 to 3 years. But with the percents that they take, the returns get so low after that that they usually become non-existent. So it makes sense if you have the means, once those licenses expire, to release yourself and make a few bucks on those older titles. So I did just that. It was right around 2011 or 12. I got the rights back on a couple of movies, found Createspace and put a couple of movies up. They put them up on Amazon for streaming, and they were literally making like a few bucks a month. And I kind of forgot about it. Then, like maybe a year later, like out of nowhere, one of the movies started making some relatively real money. It jumped from making a few bucks a month to a few $100 a month. This particular title went as high as like $1,200 a month at one point. This little tiny, like forgotten about older title was actually starting to earn money again. And for the first time, self-distribution seemed like a viable option on a larger scale than it ever had been before. At the very least, it was a cool place to put your movies up after they finished their initial runs with the distributor, which was pretty much my MO all the way through 2016. In 2016, Amazon broke off from Createspace and created Prime Video Direct. It was still basically the same service, same split at the time, but now you didn't have to go through Createspace. So Amazon became the first and still was really the only major streaming platform to this point to allow filmmakers to directly upload their movies without a distributor or aggregator. And this was huge. For the first time ever, some regular folk from Indiana could upload their 60-minute ultra-low-budget movie with little to no gatekeeping and have it listed on the new release wall right next to Fast and Furious. Now, let me qualify something. While there are movies on Prime Video Direct and all different budget levels and types and sizes, for the purposes of this discussion, I'm mostly talking about low-budget movies here. Movies produced independently, like well under $100,000. Most between $5,000 and $50,000, with no big stars, like BC level at best. in 2016, these types of movies were becoming much harder to make money with through traditional distribution. Between 2005 and 2015, I worked with a few companies producing and directing such features, and they were making out like bandits. One of the companies I was working for made over like 50 titles, and they never lost on any of them. I mean, a few broke even, but almost all of them made bank, and none of them cost more than, say, $60,000. I mean, to this day, I often regret that I didn't strike out earlier on my own. By the time I got the balls to do it, it was 2016, and this little bubble was starting to burst. There were just so many filmmakers doing it now and putting their movies up on Amazon, which leads me to its downfall. By 2017, Amazon had already started dropping the rates that they were paying filmmakers. They had started out around 15 cents per hour streamed, but they eventually dropped that to 12 cents an hour, and then shortly after that instituted the CER ranking, where they started paying filmmakers out on a sliding scale based on the movie's popularity. I've done many videos breaking down how the CER ranking worked, but honestly, with Amazon not even taking SVOD titles anymore, it's kind of moot, so I'm not going to get into it here. If you want to check out some of those videos, do so here. When they first instituted the CER sliding scale, it originally went from 6 cents an hour up to 12 cents an hour. They eventually dropped the bottom all the way down to 1 cent an hour, and by the end, over 60% of the independent films submitted through Prime Video Direct were earning 1 cent per hour streamed on Amazon. And at the same time, they were purging titles right and left with no real explanations, and were strengthening their submission requirements. In February of 2021, they stopped accepting any short films and documentaries. And then in November of 2021, they stopped accepting narrative films as well. At this time, they are still accepting indie stuff for rental and sale, but just no free with Prime at all. Now, if you already have your titles up there on Free with Prime, this won't necessarily affect you, at least for now. But keep in mind, they are constantly reevaluating the movies based on customer signals, like how long they're watching, who clicks on, how long they click on for, and what type of customer they are. And I'd like to dispel a fallacy when it comes to why movies are getting purged that have been making the rounds. I've seen filmmakers claiming that the purging is purely a quality issue, and if your film is high quality enough, you don't have to worry about being purged. Total bullshit. Now, granted, in the overall scheme of things, more poorly made movies are being purged than higher quality movies. True, but many high-quality projects have been purged too. Amazon's reasoning here is not a one-to-one bad quality equals purge. It's way more complex than that. Keep in mind, there's not a group of human beings actually watching these movies and making these decisions. These decisions are automated. They're 99% algorithmic. So why are they purging movies? Well, there's no one reason, but I'm going to lay out 3 that I think are most responsible for purges. Number 1, undesirable content. Sure, it's not fair, but I think indie flicks are being subjected to a double standard when it comes to gore, nudity, or even political type themes. Maybe a little more so on the nudity. I know several filmmakers that have had movies removed for this. Also, political content or drug stuff. I've personally had a few issues with a couple of cannabis documentaries. Number 2, retention is low, meaning people are clicking on your movie and then are clicking off in a very short amount of time. And number 3, and this is really the main reason I believe, it's oversaturation. Now, some will say user reviews factor in heavily, but I'm not so sure. The numbers I've seen from other filmmakers and distributors over the last few years just do not support this. Too many movies are being purged that have a lot of positive reviews, and other movies with little to no positive reviews remain, and vice versa. As far as I can tell, there is no general correlation between user reviews and a movie being purged or not, or even being successful. So here we are, journey's end. And many of us still do have older titles on Amazon, but From here out, Amazon is going the way of Netflix and Hulu, and there is no direct way for filmmakers to submit themselves. Not anymore, at least not free with Prime. And I have a feeling that it's really only a matter of time before the TVOD section is shut down too. And probably won't be too much longer before all the remaining Prime Video direct titles are purged. This is Future Jay. You can tell by these high-tech ear shields. When I was recording this video, it was a little unclear as to whether or not distributors and aggregators were still going to be able to submit titles to Amazon for SVOD. And as it turns out, they are still able to get titles up on SVOD. So like if you're submitting through Filmhub, they can still submit the title. If it's a distributor, like Indie Rights or Uncorked or one of those others, they can maybe still get it up on Amazon. So there are still avenues to get to Amazon Prime for independent films. You just cannot do it on your own through Prime Video Direct anymore. And honestly, my feelings on this are mixed. On one hand, I am grateful that they ever opened up distribution like this in the first place. Even if it failed, no one else on their level has even tried. And I do wish that they had early on instituted a more curated approach and not allowed really low quality or really inappropriate content in there in the first place. Perhaps if that had been the case, we wouldn't be here now. But what's happened has happened. There's no use looking back. So what can we do now as indie filmmakers looking to get our movies into the market in a major way? Well, here's a couple of quick tips. Number one, and this is going to sound glib, but make better movies. All the marketing and distribution knowledge in the world isn't going to help all that much if you're not making good stuff. Make high enough quality movies that they won't seem out of place on major platforms like Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu. Number two, don't be afraid to not do distribution by yourself. There are distributors out there that are not crooks, that do fair splits. It doesn't have to be DIY. Now, that said, I'm not bagging on DIY distribution, and if you're willing to put in the work, it can really pay off. And new media on demand outlets have popped up, but there is a market for DIY. You can go through sites like Allied Vaughn or do digital downloads through Gumroad. You can still submit directly to Vimeo on demand. And look, it's notoriously hard to drive traffic to places that are not publicly well known, but it is possible. Savvy filmmakers do it. And number three, things always change. Just don't give up. Keep making movies.